Happy Pioneer Day, my great and spacious world. I bet some of you are like, what is Pioneer Day? So, it's July 24th every year, and it's when Mormons can celebrate their pioneer heritage. Not every Mormon has pioneer heritage, but this ex-mormon does. I went and got my pedigree chart, and I am a 7th generation Mormon on multiple lines. So yeah, I've got some thick Mormon pioneer heritage to celebrate today, and I've got a few stories for you. So on my dad's side of the family, I have an apostate Mormon pioneer. It's interesting because growing up, we always talked about this person's story like it was so sad and let's learn from our past and not let it happen again. But now that I've left the church, this is one of my most cherished ancestral stories, and I'm going to share it with you today. Okay, so William Tweedy Wright and his wife Maria Brown, they come across the plains while Maria is pregnant. I cannot imagine crossing the plains pregnant. They make it to Salt Lake, where Brigham Young has them go off and make a settlement. And so they went with 13 other pioneer families, and they make a settlement in what is known as Franklin. Now, Franklin, Idaho is the oldest town in Idaho, founded in 1860 by these 13 pioneer families. And it's the oldest town in Idaho only because they thought they were still in Utah. So there's this valley in Utah. It's called Cache Valley. Some of you might have heard of it. It's like where Logan is, where USU is. And that valley just happens to extend into Idaho. And so they didn't know that they weren't in Utah. And that is how the oldest city in Idaho was settled. And William Tweedy Wright was one of those 13 pioneer families. My great-great-great-grandfather, William Tweedy, and he ran the store that you'd get goods out of. And that's kind of where this story comes from. I'm going to be reading this story because I know how it was told to me, but I think it would be nice to read the account. This was written by his granddaughter, Melba. This is a second-hand story. It says, grandfather was a very proud man, and when there was an argument at the store where he worked as the clerk and bookkeeper, he felt that he had been wronged by Bishop Hatch. That's kind of funny because I also grew up with a Bishop Hatch, and so I bet I'm pretty sure it's the same Hatch family. I had a great relationship with Hatches, but I guess our ancestors did not get along too well. And William became disenchanted with the church. He remarked at one time, "If the bishop would right the wrong that had been done, I will meet him halfway and I will return to church." The bishop never did, and William gradually left the church and eventually became dismembered. There are several stories regarding this dismembership. My mother told me it this way. Grandfather had been instructed by the bishop to not allow credit to anyone for goods purchased. Grandfather adhered strictly to this rule and refused credit to one of the wives of the member of the bishopric, who was the Parkinson family. And that's funny too, because I grew up with the Parkinsons, and I remember one of the Parkinsons being the mayor of our small town, and we had great relationships with them too. But it's interesting to see all these family names in the valley being brought up in this story. Also, I've always seen this side of my family as very fair. So if there's a rule, they're going to be fair about it. So I can totally see my grandpa William being no, this is the rule and we're sticking to it because that's what's fair. I think fairness is something that this side of my family seems to really value. Instead of backing grandfather's actions, the bishop ridiculed him in front of a large crowd and gave the credit to the woman. Ooh, so yeah, I can see how that would be a really sensitive thing. And back in the pioneer days, it's not like you can really defend yourself against the leadership, because they are not only your religious leaders, but they're also the government leaders. They don't just have power in a religious setting, but they have power in the community. I think it was really bold for my great-great-great-grandpa to try to stand up for what he felt was right. Okay, here's another part of the story. The saints had been forbidden to subscribe to the Salt Lake Tribune, a Gentile paper. Oh my word. The Salt Lake Tribune is still around and probably one of the only newspapers that reports the not so pleasant side of Mormonism. And I think it's funny that right here they just call it out and call it the Gentile paper. And because William was an avid reader, he would disobey and subscribe to this paper and read this paper. Go, Grandpa William! I love it. He's like an educated man. He's not limiting his research to what the church allows him to read. Many other families were dismembered at the same time for various reasons, such as buying cloth from a Gentile store and swearing in Welsh, among other reasons. Because grandfather was such a proud man, he would not go back and, to my knowledge, never went to church again. The majority of the family was very bitter, and none of the first generation returned to church, but many of the second generation became members. Research has shown that William and Maria's names were never taken off the official records of the church, only the records in the town of Franklin. I have found their names still on church records. That's interesting, don't you think? There's lots of people that leave the church that their names never get pulled off the records. After he left the church, he began to smoke a pipe. In talking with my sister Thelma, they can remember him smoking his pipe and how Thelma and cousin Douglas would go fight to see who got to light it. Thelma remembers him as a small man who seldom spoke, with a fringe of whiskers. Like a time clock, he would get out of his old chair exactly at 9 o'clock, go look at the clock, and prepare for bed. After grandmother Wright passed away, a home was built for him and Aunt Maggie in Franklin. It was there that Aunt Maggie tenderly cared for him in his last illness. My mother told me that she felt the cancer that had begun near his eye. He would clean out his pipe bowl with his finger and then wipe his eye. The dreaded disease completely engulfed his eye and the top of his head. Aunt Maggie would dress and take care of this and took wonderful care of him. Although his face was practically in away, he still had the same cheerful outlook on life. And through all of his trials and tribulations, he never grumbled or complained. His many friends loved and grieved over his death when it came June 7th of 1920. The life of this noble pioneer should indeed be an inspiration to all of his posterity. And that was my great-great-great-grandpa, William Tweedy Wright. And I love having this story now. I love having an ancestor that I feel like I can relate to and someone who would have understood me and maybe even been proud of me for sticking up for what I believe is true. That's all for today, guys. Hope you have a great Pioneers Day, no matter how you spend it, and I'll see you next week. Bye!